The thing with unscripted live television is that when things don't go to plan, it's there for the world to witness. And in MMA, things are no different. With the UFC holding events almost every weekend, there's a lot of opportunities for weird shit to go down. And my goodness, have there been some very odd moments over the years. I'm George from Fight Game Insider, and today we'll be looking at the 10 weirdest MMA moments. Number 10. Rampage Jackson dry humps reporter. During an interview with Cage Potato, reporter Heather Nichols was flying through a seemingly normal interview with UFC fighter Quinton Rampage Jackson, asking questions mostly around the Ultimate Fighter and potential opponents. She then raised the idea of him taking on acting roles. Rampage would explain that he had multiple film offers which he had to turn down due to UFC commitments, but things went south after Heather jokingly proposed a romantic comedy idea starring them both.
Well, I have an idea for a romantic comedy starring you and me.
Oh, yeah.
It's about a wrestler who falls in love with a ring girl. What do you think? You in?
Yeah.
After dropping multiple hints that she wanted him to stop, the dry humping would last a whole 40 seconds. And to make it even weirder, Rampage hardly said a word, not to mention the heavy eye contact. The reporter did a great job of maintaining professionalism and even continued to ask questions whilst it was playing out. One of the production crew eventually had to tap Rampage on the shoulder to let him know that's enough. Number 9. Gray Maynard knocks himself unconscious? For the Ultimate Fighter 5 finale back in 2007, standouts Gray Maynard and Rob Emerson would collide in a bout that Gray would ultimately dominate. Being well up on the scorecards and having Emerson hurt, Maynard would secure a double leg, pick his opponent up and slam him to the canvas. Seconds later, Emerson would tap due to an injured rib and the accumulated damage he'd just taken. What would soon become apparent is that during the slam, Gray Maynard had actually hit his own head on the floor, in turn knocking himself out cold. Joe Rogan was not afraid to address the incident directly in their Octagon interview, to say the least.
Bro, look at the replay. You picked him up, watch the dump, bang. You hit your head down, now watch this. You're out. Watch this. He is done, but so are you.
Which turned into an interesting back and forth as Maynard would categorically deny going unconscious.
I remember sitting in the corner. He tapped. I thought it was over. I rolled over. Of course, I'm a little tired.
I deny your grace's accusation.
Things worked out pretty well for Rob, as in a twist of fate, he would avoid getting a loss on the record. As for Maynard, this is the pinnacle of unlucky, and I'm sure going for that slam is a decision that haunts him until this day. Number 8. Chael Sonnen thought tapping out meant you only lost the round. We've heard some bizarre excuses for why athletes lost a fight, from Paulo Costa's bottle of wine to Jake Paul's wet dream the night before. But right up there is Chael Sonnen's infamous first fight against Anderson Silva, in which Sonnen was well up on the scorecards and seconds away from ending Silva's historic title reign, before the Spider locked in a 5th round triangle armbar and forced the tap. In a later interview, Chael would go on to explain why he thought tapping meant you lost the round, not the fight, and that if he'd known the rules, he would never have tapped. The reactions of Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz make this moment even greater in an excuse for the ages.
This is the truth. That was a misunderstanding of the rules. And the way I thought it worked was that if you tapped, you lost that round. So I thought what they would do is they go to a judge's decision, they go 4 rounds to 1, and we go home and I'd be the new champion. And if anyone had explained to me that that stops the bout in its entirety, I would not have tapped.
As destiny would have it, when the rematch came about, Silva would destroy Sonnen with a 2nd round TKO, denying Chael of his clearly justified redemption. Number 7. Forest Griffin runs off before decision announced? It's not uncommon for fighters to leave the octagon after their loss has been announced, swerving the embarrassment of having to explain themselves immediately post-fight. But when Forest Griffin faced Tito Ortiz in the co-main event of UFC 148, thinking he fell short, Forrest wasted no time making his way back to the dressing room before the announcement had even been read. Dana was then seen chasing him down, saying, "Get the back in the cage," to which Forrest reluctantly obliged. What makes this moment even weirder is the fact that when Bruce Buffer declared the winner, to everyone's surprise, Griffin had actually won. When interviewed by Ariel Helwani after the bout, Forrest had this to say.
I was actually coming back anyway to be respectful towards Tito. I just forget sometimes. I get, emotional guy. I was frustrated with myself. But when I crossed, Dana White was yelling at me to get the F back in the cage.
Did you think you had lost?
I don't know.
In a post-fight interview with Dana, he wasn't at all happy and slandered Forrest at every given opportunity, calling what he did professional suicide. Number 6. Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman leg break paradox. The word coincidence would be an understatement for this next one, in a tale of events that couldn't be scripted. For those who were around for Anderson Silva's legendary title reign, you'll remember the night he ran into then undefeated All-American Chris Weidman. After Chris knocked Anderson out in the second round, their rematch was highly anticipated to say the least. But in a horrific turn of events, Silva would unfortunately snap his leg, throwing a kick to Weidman's shin. Surprisingly, this type of injury is not common at all in the mixed martial arts, and at the time was the only one of its kind in UFC history. When would someone next slap their leg throwing a low kick? Against all odds, 8 years later, we would see the exact same injury from the exact same move, but this time with Chris Weidman on the receiving end, in the first strike he threw against Uriah Hall at UFC 261. I'm not sure if we momentarily entered a parallel dimension, or if the MMA gods were trying to even scores, but you just simply can't make this stuff up. On a side note, the next time we'd see this happen would be with Conor McGregor of all people. Fair play, he has no ties to either Anderson or Weidman, but he does so happen to be the biggest star the sport has ever seen. With there being well over 7,000 bouts since the promotion was founded, for it to happen to these three is beyond weird. Number 5. Tim Sylvia poops pants mid-fight. Staying on the unexpected mid-fight occurrence vibe, let's travel back to UFC Fight Night 3 in early 2006, which saw former UFC heavyweight champion Tim Sylvia take on Pride veteran Asuario Silva. Despite Sylvia getting the UD win, all wasn't as it seemed, as he would later come out saying he was very ill leading into the fight, and if you checked his shorts, the truth would have been revealed. Tim had unfortunately failed to hold in his number 2, and quite literally himself mid-fight. Asuario attempted to jump guard in the second round, which pulled Tim's shorts down slightly, revealing a clear brown stain on his underwear. Luckily for Tim, it wasn't super obvious, and he would get his hand raised. But I'm sure this is a night he'll remember for the wrong reasons. Number 4. Yoel Romero kisses Luke Rockhold. After falling short on his first attempt at UFC Gold, Yoel Romero bounced back strong with a vicious third-round knockout over Luke Rockhold. I always stand by Romero being one of the most unintentionally funny people on the planet, and on this fateful 2018 night, he only proved me right. Shortly after separating Rockhold from consciousness, Romero pranced around the cage before approaching Luke to show him some affection. Whether Rockhold would describe it as affection is up for debate, but in a moment etched in history forever, Romero literally kisses Luke, showing no regard for personal space, or the fact he's just been knocked out and probably has no idea what's going on. Rockhold can be seen visibly traumatized from the event, and most likely one that will surface in his dreams for years to come.
I love you!
Number 3. Dennis Hullman fights in Speedos. One may say the UFC is pretty heavily regulated, but that hasn't always been the case. Back in the early days, fighters were given way more flexibility, especially when it came to their fighting attire. One of the most notable nights for this going completely wrong was back in 2011 at UFC 133, where Dennis Hullman showed up to fight in tight blue Speedos. Dana was absolutely fuming, and later referred to the ordeal as disgusting. He would also say that despite Dennis losing the bout against Brian Ebersold in the first round, he awarded him a $70,000 bonus for getting that off television as fast as possible.
$70,000 bonus. There were only 3 bonuses tonight. Tito, Rashad for fight of the night, and then Vitor for the knockout of the night. That's it. There were no more bonuses. I gave him that bonus for getting that off television as fast as possible.
Number 2. Lyoto Machida believes drinking own urine makes him stronger. This one definitely sits on the same platform as Bryce Mitchell's Flat Earth Theory, but we couldn't make a top 10 weirdest MMA moments list without including this Lyoto Machida classic.
Did you drink any urine in preparation for this fight?
No, for this time. No, for this time. I stopped a little bit, yeah.
Lyoto, also known as the Dragon, was adamant that drinking your own urine in the morning flushes your system out, which includes vitamins and minerals to make you stronger. As you can imagine, Machida faced brutal backlash for his claims and was forced to answer many uncomfortable questions.
What does it taste like? I mean, it's got a kind of gross smell.
Sometimes depends on what you eat the day before.
In more recent interviews, the Dragon confessed that he no longer incorporates this into his training, but still stands firm behind the idea in general. Number 1. Luke Rockholds smears bloodied face on Paulo Costa. No surprise Luke Rockhold made this list for a second time, this one being his retirement fight in the co-main event for UFC 278. The main instance we're going to be talking about here took place at the end of the bout, but in all honesty, the whole fight was a weird one from the start. Whether it was the elevation of fighting in Salt Lake City or the lack of preparation, both fighters seemed sluggish and displayed little technique throughout. Winging punches and gassing out early, it just had a strange vibe to it. But things went from weird to borderline sexual when in the final seconds of the fight, Luke had Costa in mount and decided to smear his bloodied face all over him. In a sequence of events that seemed to go on forever, the commentators were as baffled as us at home were, trying to work out what we were watching. Rockhold would ultimately come up short and lose via UD, but we thank him for leaving us with a hilarious scene that will most likely be shared across the internet for the rest of history. And that just about wraps it up for today's video. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and head-kick the bell icon to be notified when there's a new upload. Thanks for watching, I'm George, and until next time, see ya!